After the family dinner, my brother smiled and handed me his pack of cigarettes. Outside, I opened it and found a note. Run through the backyard, now. I listened, my heart pounding. It saved my life. What I did in the next few days turned my parents' smiles into tears. My name is Aaron Merton, and I'm 27 years old. I work as a junior insurance investigator for a small firm in our town, which means I spend my days looking for patterns, inconsistencies, and lies. It's a skill that comes naturally to me, though I never expected I'd need to use it on my own family. The Sunday dinner had started like any other. My mother, Patricia, 54, and the town's beloved community organizer, had prepared her usual spread of roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. My father, Damon, 58, and owner of a small auto repair shop, sat at the head of the table making jokes about his customers. My younger brother, Ben, 24 and perpetually quiet, picked at his food while avoiding eye contact with everyone. I should have noticed the tension earlier. Patricia's smile seemed forced, her laugh a little too bright. Damon kept glancing at his watch, as if waiting for something. Ben looked nervous, his hands shaking slightly as he reached for his water glass. "Aaron, dear," Patricia said, cutting her chicken with precise movements, "your father and I have been discussing some family matters. Important matters." "Oh?" I set down my fork, suddenly alert. Something in her tone made my investigator instincts kick in. "Yes," Damon chimed in, his voice carrying that false cheerfulness I remembered from childhood when he was about to deliver bad news. "We think it's time for some changes around here, some transitions." Ben's head snapped up at the word transitions, and I caught his eye for just a moment. The fear I saw there made my stomach clench. "What kind of transitions?" I asked carefully. Patricia and Damon exchanged a look that lasted just a beat too long. In my line of work, I'd learned that hesitations like that usually meant someone was about to lie. "Well," Patricia continued, "we've been thinking about the future, about responsibility, about who can be trusted with family matters." The words hung in the air like a threat. I felt the familiar prickle of danger that I'd learned to trust during insurance investigations. Something was very wrong here. "I see," I said, though I didn't see it all. "And what does that mean, exactly?" Damon's smile grew wider, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, we'll discuss all the details soon enough. Very soon." Ben suddenly stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I need some air," he mumbled, pulling a pack of Marlboro Lights from his pocket. He'd started smoking 6 months ago, much to our parents' disapproval, but tonight they said nothing. "I'll join you," I said, starting to rise. "No," Patricia said sharply, then softened her tone. "Finish your dinner first, Aaron. Family time is important." But Ben was already walking toward me, the cigarette pack extended. "Here, take these. I'm trying to quit anyway." His eyes met mine for just a second, and I saw something there that made me take the pack without argument. "Thanks," I said, slipping it into my jacket pocket. Ben nodded and headed for the back door. "I'll just walk around the yard for a minute." After he left, the conversation continued, but I barely heard it. Patricia and Damon talked about community events and business matters, their voices creating a pleasant background hum that felt increasingly sinister. Every few minutes, one of them would glance toward the back door or check their phone. 20 minutes later, I excused myself. "I should probably head home. Early day tomorrow." "Of course, dear," Patricia said, standing to hug me. Her embrace felt different somehow, tighter and more final. "Drive safely." Damon clapped me on the shoulder with more force than necessary. "Take care of yourself, son. These next few days are going to be interesting." Outside, the October air was crisp and sharp. I walked toward my car, parked at the curb, but something made me stop. Maybe it was my investigator training, or maybe it was the way Ben had looked at me during dinner. Instead of getting in the car, I pulled out the cigarette pack. I don't smoke, never have, but I opened the pack anyway. Inside, nestled among the cigarettes, was a small piece of paper, folded tight. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded it. Written in Ben's careful handwriting were 5 words: "Run through the backyard, now." My heart started pounding. Ben wasn't the dramatic type. He didn't play pranks or write cryptic notes. If he'd gone to the trouble of hiding a warning in a cigarette pack, something was seriously wrong. I looked back at the house. Through the dining room window, I could see Patricia and Damon still sitting at the table, but they weren't eating. They were both looking toward the front door, waiting. Without another thought, I pocketed my car keys and walked quickly toward the side of the house. The Merton family property backed up to a small wooded area, with an old wooden fence separating our yard from the trees. Ben and I had climbed that fence countless times as kids. I made it to the backyard just as I heard the front door open. Patricia's voice carried on the night air. Aaron? Aaron, honey, did you forget something? I crouched behind the old woodshed that Damon had built years ago and never quite finished. Through a gap between the boards, I watched as both my parents came around the side of the house, flashlights in hand. His car's still here, Damon said, his voice no longer carrying that false cheerfulness. Now he sounded angry, frustrated. He has to be close, Patricia replied. Check the garage. I'll look around back. I held my breath as Patricia's flashlight beam swept across the yard. She was moving methodically, checking behind trees and bushes. When the light passed over the woodshed, I pressed myself flat against the back wall. My phone buzzed with a text message. I didn't dare look at it, but I could see the screen light up through my pocket. A moment later, it buzzed again. Aaron, sweetheart, Patricia called out, her voice sweet as honey. Your phone is ringing. Are you out here? We just want to talk to you about something important. Something important. The same phrase Damon had used at dinner when talking about transitions. I thought about the fear in Ben's eyes, the way my parents had been checking their phones and watching the clock. Whatever they wanted to discuss, Ben thought it was dangerous enough to warn me to run. I waited in the shadows for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes. Finally, I heard Patricia call out, He must have walked somewhere. We'll try calling him again later. Their footsteps retreated toward the house. I waited another 10 minutes before carefully making my way to the back fence. The old boards creaked as I climbed over, but the sound was covered by the wind in the trees. Once I was safely in the woods, I pulled out my phone. 2 text messages from Patricia. Honey, where did you go? Come back inside. And then, Aaron, please call me. We're worried about you. I also had a text from an unknown number. Meet me tonight. Usual spot. B. Ben. He must have gotten a burner phone or borrowed someone else's. The usual spot was an old oak tree about half a mile into the woods, where we used to meet as kids when we wanted to talk without our parents overhearing. I looked back toward the house. Most of the lights were still on, and I could see figures moving behind the curtains. My parents were definitely looking for me, and their behavior suggested this was about more than just a family conversation. I made my way through the woods to my car, approaching from the opposite direction. The street was quiet, and I didn't see anyone watching, so I quickly got in and drove away. As I headed toward my small apartment across town, my mind raced through the events of the evening. The forced conversation about transitions and responsibility, the way my parents had been watching the clock, their immediate search when I didn't come back inside, and Ben's warning, urgent enough that he'd risked slipping me a note during a family dinner. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than a simple family disagreement. And Ben, my quiet, overlooked younger brother, was trying to protect me from it. I spent the rest of Sunday evening pacing around my apartment, checking the locks twice and keeping the curtains drawn. Every car that drove past made me tense up. Every footstep in the hallway made me freeze. I felt paranoid, but Ben's warning had been real enough, and my parents' behavior afterward had confirmed that something was seriously wrong. At 11 o'clock, I drove back toward the family neighborhood, parking 3 blocks away and walking through the woods to our old meeting spot. The oak tree stood in a small clearing, its massive trunk scarred with initials Ben and I had carved years ago. I didn't have to wait long. Ben emerged from the shadows like a ghost, moving quietly through the underbrush. In the moonlight, he looked older than his 24 years, his face drawn with stress. "Thank God you got the message," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't sure you'd check the pack." "What's going on, Ben? Why did I need to run?" He sat down heavily on a fallen log, running his hands through his hair. They were planning something for tonight. I overheard them talking yesterday in Dad's study. They kept saying things like, "Teach Aaron a lesson, and he needs to understand his place." "What kind of lesson?" "I don't know exactly, but Mom had papers spread out on the desk. Legal papers. And Dad was on the phone with someone talking about removal and assets. When I tried to get closer to hear better, Mom saw me and slammed the door. A cold wave washed over me. In my work, I'd seen families destroy each other over money and property, but I never imagined my own parents would be capable of something like that. "Ben, I need you to think carefully. What exactly did you hear?" He closed his eyes, concentrating. Dad was saying something about the Aaron problem and how it needed to be handled permanently. Mom mentioned something about a meeting tonight after dinner, and then Dad said, Ben's voice trailed off. "What did he say?" "He said, once we're done, he won't be able to cause any more trouble." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own father, talking about me like I was some kind of threat to be eliminated. But eliminated how? And why? "There's more," Ben continued. "I've been noticing things for months now. Strange phone calls that stop when I walk into the room. meetings with people I don't recognize, and my bank account. What about your bank account? Money's been disappearing. Small amounts at first, then bigger ones. When I asked Mom about it, she said I must be forgetting my purchases. But I keep track of everything, Aaron. I know someone's been taking money from my account. This was starting to make sense in a horrible way. Financial manipulation was often the first step in family fraud cases. If they were stealing from Ben, they might be stealing from me too. Ben, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Do you think our parents are capable of serious financial fraud? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ground. When he looked up, his eyes were full of pain. 6 months ago, I would have said no. But now, Aaron, I think they've been planning something for a long time, and I think tonight was supposed to be the beginning. The beginning of what? I don't know. But after you left, they made a bunch of phone calls, and Dad loaded some boxes into his truck, boxes from his office. I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. We need to get evidence, Ben. If they're planning something illegal, we need proof. I've been trying, he said. I've been writing down everything I overhear, taking pictures when I can, but they are careful around me now. They know I'm suspicious. Where do they keep their important papers? Dad's study, mostly, but there is also a locked cabinet in the basement. I've never seen inside it, but Mom and Dad go down there together sometimes, usually late at night. The basement. I remembered that cabinet from childhood, how our parents had always told us it contained boring adult stuff and warned us to stay away from it. Now I wondered what was really inside. Can you get me into the house tomorrow night, when they're not there? Ben nodded slowly. They have that community board meeting Tuesday evening. They'll be gone for at least 2 hours. Good. We'll search the basement first, then Dad's study if we have time. Aaron, Ben's voice was shaky. What if we find something really bad? What if they've been stealing money or forging documents or... Then we'll deal with it, together. I put my hand on his shoulder. Ben, you probably saved my life tonight. Whatever they were planning, you stopped it. Now we need to figure out what they're really up to. We talked for another hour, going over everything Ben had noticed in recent months. The pattern that emerged was troubling. Increased secrecy, financial irregularities, and what sounded like preparation for some kind of major action. Ben also mentioned seeing our neighbor, Mrs. Rue, watching the house more often lately, as if she'd noticed something unusual too. When we finally parted ways, I felt a strange mixture of fear and determination. For years, I'd been the invisible son in the Merton family, overlooked and underestimated while Ben got most of the attention. But my work as an insurance investigator had taught me how to spot fraud and gather evidence. If my parents were planning something illegal, I had the skills to expose them. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day researching financial fraud patterns and legal procedures. I also drove past my parents' house twice, noting the cars in the driveway and the general activity level. Everything looked normal from the outside, but I knew that was often how these things worked. The most successful fraudsters were the ones who maintained perfect facades. That afternoon, I received a call from my mother. Aaron, honey, we were so worried about you last night. You just disappeared. Sorry, Mom, I wasn't feeling well. I went for a walk and then headed home. Are you feeling better today? Your father and I would love to have you over for dinner again soon. We have so much to discuss with you. The false sweetness in her voice made my skin crawl. I'm still not feeling great. Maybe later this week? Of course, dear. Take care of yourself. We love you. After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone. The woman who had raised me, who had bandaged my scraped knees and helped with my homework, was now calling to set up what Ben believed was some kind of trap. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Tuesday evening couldn't come fast enough. I parked several blocks away and walked through the woods to the back of my childhood home. Ben was waiting by the back door, keys in hand. They left 20 minutes ago, he whispered. Mom made a big show of grabbing all her community board materials. We slipped inside through the Kit Norin. The house felt different now, charged with tension and secrets. Ben led me down to the basement, where the locked cabinet stood in the corner like a silent sentinel. I found Dad's spare key, Ben said, producing a small silver key from his pocket. He keeps it taped under his workbench. The cabinet opened with a soft click. Inside were dozens of files, organized with the same meticulous care my mother brought to her community work. But these weren't community files. The first folder I pulled out was labeled Aaron Options in my mother's neat handwriting. Inside were documents I didn't recognize at first. Property deeds, loan applications, and what looked like insurance policies. But as I read more carefully, a horrifying picture began to emerge. Someone had been using my name and social security number to secure loans and purchase property. The signatures looked like mine, but I had never seen these documents before in my life. According to the papers, I owned a house I'd never bought and owed money on loans I'd never taken out. "Ben," I said, my voice tight with shock, "take pictures of everything, every page." While Ben used his phone to document the contents, I pulled out more folders. One was labeled Benjamin Account Access and contained what appeared to be bank routing information and forged authorization forms. Another was titled Merton Holdings, LLC, and contained business registration documents for a company I'd never heard of. The deepest file in the cabinet was the most disturbing. Labeled simply Timeline, it contained a month-by-month plan stretching back over 2 years. The early entries were about establishing financial foundations and securing documentation. The more recent entries were chilling. Aaron removal, Phase 1, and asset transfer completion. According to the timeline, Sunday night's dinner was supposed to be Aaron confrontation and consent acquisition. The next phase, scheduled for this week, was labeled Legal Finalization and Family Restructuring. "Oh my God," Ben whispered, looking at his phone screen. "Aaron, look at this." He showed me a document from his folder, a power of attorney form with his forged signature, giving our parents complete control over his finances and legal affairs. The date on the form was from 6 months ago, right around the time he'd started noticing money disappearing from his account. I felt sick. My parents hadn't just been stealing money. They'd been systematically setting up a legal framework to control both their sons' lives and assets. The dinner on Sunday wasn't just supposed to be a confrontation, it was supposed to be the moment they presented me with a fait accompli and forced me to sign similar documents. "We need to get out of here," I said, carefully putting the files back in order. "But first, Ben, I need you to copy everything onto this flash drive." While Ben worked, I took photos of the cabinet itself, the basement, and anything else that might serve as evidence. The scope of what we'd discovered was staggering. This wasn't just family dysfunction or even simple theft. It was a complex, long-term fraud scheme that had turned Ben and me into unwitting victims of our own parents. When we finished, we locked the cabinet and crept back upstairs. The house still felt empty, but I was taking no chances. We slipped out the back door and separated, Ben returning to his attic bedroom and me disappearing into the woods. As I walked back to my car, my mind was racing. I now had evidence of serious financial crimes, but I also had a bigger problem. My parents clearly weren't going to stop. According to their timeline, they were planning to move forward with legal finalization within days. I needed help, and I needed it fast. But who could I trust? The local police might be skeptical of accusations against 2 well-respected community members. I needed someone with legal expertise who could help me understand my options and protect both Ben and myself. That's when I remembered Carla Munoz, a girl I'd known in high school who had become a lawyer. We'd stayed in touch sporadically over the years, and I knew she practiced family and criminal law in the next town over. If anyone could help me navigate this nightmare, it would be Carla. But first, I needed to check my own bank accounts and credit reports. If my parents had been forging documents in my name for 2 years, there was no telling what other financial damage they might have done. The investigation was just beginning, and I had a feeling it was going to get much worse before it got better. Wednesday morning, I drove to the next town over and met Carla Munoz at a small cafe near her law office. I hadn't seen her in person for almost 3 years, but she looked exactly the same. Sharp-eyed, professionally dressed, and radiating the kind of confidence that comes from winning difficult cases. "Aaron," she said, standing to hug me, "it's good to see you, but your phone call yesterday sounded pretty serious." "It is serious. Carla, I think my parents have been committing financial fraud using my identity, and possibly my brother's too." Her expression immediately shifted into lawyer mode. "Tell me everything." I spent the next hour walking her through Ben's warning, our discovery in the basement, and the documents we'd found. Carla took notes and asked pointed questions about dates, amounts, and specific legal language in the papers. "This is bad, Aaron," she said when I finished. "If what you're telling me is accurate, we're looking at identity theft, forgery, fraud, and possibly racketeering if they've been using that LLC to funnel money. What are my options? First, we need to secure more evidence. What you have is good, but we need bank records, credit reports, and ideally some kind of documentation of their intent to continue the fraud. How do we get that? Carefully. If they realize you're investigating, they might accelerate their timeline or destroy evidence." Carla leaned forward. "Aaron, I have to ask, do you think they would physically harm you or Ben?" The question hit me like a cold splash of water. I thought about Sunday night, about the way my parents had searched the yard with flashlights, about Ben's fear and the urgency of his warning. "I don't know," I said honestly. A week ago, I would have said absolutely not, But a week ago, I also wouldn't have believed they were capable of systematic fraud. Then we need to move quickly. I'm going to start preparing legal filings to freeze any accounts or assets in your name. In the meantime, you need to pull your credit reports and bank statements. And Aaron? Yeah? Don't confront them directly. Don't let them know you're suspicious. If they think you're onto them, they might do something desperate. After leaving Carla, I spent the afternoon at the bank and the credit reporting office, gathering every piece of financial documentation I could get my hands on. What I found was even worse than I'd feared. According to my credit report, I had 3 loans I'd never applied for, totaling almost $60,000. I apparently owned a rental property in the next county that was generating monthly income I'd never seen. My bank account showed regular transfers to Merton Holdings LLC going back 18 months, transfers I had never authorized. I was, according to the paperwork, deeply in debt and potentially liable for business obligations I knew nothing about. If my parents' plan had succeeded, they could have left me financially ruined while walking away with hundreds of thousands of dollars in assets purchased with fraudulent loans. That evening, I called Ben from a payphone outside a gas station. I didn't trust our regular phones anymore. "How are things at home?" I asked. "Tense. Mom and Dad keep asking me if I've heard from you. They want to know if you're feeling better and when you might come by for another family dinner." "What did you tell them?" "That you said you were still sick and would call them when you felt up to visiting." "Good. Ben, I need you to be extra careful for the next few days. Don't go anywhere alone if you can help it, and if they try to get you to sign anything at all, find an excuse to delay." "Aaron, you're scaring me." "I'm scared too, but we're going to get through this." After I hung up, I drove past our neighbor Mrs. Rue's house. Her porch light was on, and I could see her sitting in her rocking chair, reading a book. Mrs. Rue had been our neighbor for 20 years, and she'd always been observant. If anyone had noticed unusual activity at my parents' house, it would be her. I parked and walked up to her porch. "Evening, Mrs. Rue." "Aaron Merton." She looked up with surprise. "I haven't seen you around the neighborhood lately." "I've been busy with work. Mrs. Rue, can I ask you something? Have you noticed anything unusual at my parents' house recently? Any strange visitors or late-night activity?" Her expression grew thoughtful. "Well, now that you mention it, there have been some odd things. People coming and going at strange hours. And I've heard raised voices a few times, which isn't like your parents at all." "What kind of people?" "Men in suits, mostly. They don't look like your parents' usual friends. And there was a moving truck there last week, but I didn't see anyone moving in or out. Just boxes going into your father's garage." This was new information. "Do you remember what day that was?" "Tuesday, I think. Your mother came over afterward and asked me if I'd seen anything unusual. She said they were just storing some business documents for your father's shop, but she seemed nervous about it." A Mrs. Rue's observations confirmed that my parents were actively working on something big, and they were worried about being noticed. The fact that they'd approached Mrs. Rue directly suggested they knew she was paying attention. "Mrs. Rue, if you see anything else unusual, would you mind giving me a call?" I wrote my number on a piece of paper. "Of course, dear. Is everything all right? You seem worried." "I'm just concerned about some family business matters. Nothing for you to worry about." But as I walked back to my car, I realized that Mrs. Rue might be in danger too. If my parents were willing to commit large-scale fraud against their own children, they might be willing to intimidate or threaten a neighbor who knew too much. Thursday morning brought a new crisis. I arrived at work to find my supervisor, Janet, waiting for me with a concerned expression. "Aaron, I got a strange phone call yesterday. Someone claiming to be your father called to ask about your employment status and salary information." A sharp chill settled in my chest. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing, of course. We don't give out employee information to anyone without written authorization. But he seemed to know a lot about your job already. He mentioned your insurance investigation work specifically." This meant my parents were actively gathering information about my finances and employment, probably to support whatever legal action they were planning. It also meant they might be getting close to making their move. "Janet, if anyone else calls asking about me, please don't give them any information. And if you don't mind, could you document the call, date, time, what was said?" "Sure. Aaron, is everything okay? You've seemed stressed lately." "Just some family issues. I'll work them out." But I was running out of time to work anything out. According to the timeline Ben and I had found, my parents were planning to finalize their scheme within days. I needed more evidence, and I needed it fast. That afternoon, I made a decision that felt dangerous but necessary. I drove to my father's auto shop, planning to look for evidence of the Merton Holdings LLC or any other documentation related to their fraud. Damon's Auto Repair occupied a small building on the edge of town, surrounded by cars in various states of disrepair. I'd worked there summers during high school, so I knew the layout well. Damon's office was in the back, separated from the garage by a glass partition. I parked across the street and waited. Damon was working under the hood of a pickup truck, and his part-time mechanic was busy with another car. The office appeared to be empty. I walked in like I belonged there. "Hey, Dad!" Damon looked up, startled. "Aaron, what are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. How's business?" "Good, good. Busy as always." But his eyes were wary, and I noticed him glance toward the office. "What brings you to this part of town?" "Just running errands. Mind if I use your bathroom?" The bathroom was next to the office, which would give me a chance to look around. Damon hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure, go ahead." The bathroom door was positioned so that I could see into the office through the glass partition. Damon's desk was covered with the usual invoices and repair orders, but I could also see a folder marked ML Holdings, partially hidden under other papers. When I came out of the bathroom, Damon was waiting for me, his expression hard. "Aaron, we need to talk." "About what?" "About your attitude lately. About the way you've been avoiding your mother and me. We're your family, son. We deserve better than this." The word deserve hit me like a slap. After everything I'd discovered, after all the fraud and manipulation, he was talking about what they deserved. "You're right," I said carefully. "Family is important. Maybe we could all sit down soon and have a real conversation about things." "That's exactly what we want. In fact, your mother and I have been planning something special. A family meeting where we can clear the air and talk about the future." A family meeting. That sounded ominously like the Aaron confrontation mentioned in their timeline. "Sounds good, Dad. When were you thinking?" "Soon. Very soon. We'll call you." As I left the shop, I felt Damon's eyes on me the whole way to my car. The conversation had confirmed my worst fears. They were definitely planning something, and it was going to happen quickly. I drove straight to Carla's office. "They're accelerating their timeline," I told her. "My father just mentioned a family meeting to clear the air. Based on what Ben and I found, I think that's when they plan to confront me with their demands." Carla looked grim. "Then we need to be ready. I've prepared preliminary injunction papers to freeze the accounts and assets in your name. If they try to force you into anything, we can file immediately." "What about Ben?" "We'll include him in the filing. But Aaron, there's something else we need to discuss. If this goes to court, it's going to be public. Your parents' reputations in the community will be destroyed." "Good," I said, and I meant it. "They've destroyed my financial reputation. They've stolen from Ben. They've turned our family into a criminal enterprise. Let the community see who they really are." "All right then, but be prepared for them to fight back hard. People don't commit this level of fraud without being willing to do whatever it takes to protect themselves." As I left Carla's office, I realized that the scared, confused man who had found Ben's note just 4 days ago was gone. In his place was someone harder, more determined. My parents had taught me to be thorough and persistent in my work as an investigator. Now I was going to use those skills against them. The war for my life and my brother's freedom was about to begin. Friday morning, I woke up to find 3 missed calls from my mother and a voicemail that sent a chill straight through me. "Aaron, sweetheart, it's Mom. We really need to see you this weekend. Your father and I have made some important decisions about the family and we need your input. Please call me back as soon as you get this. It's urgent." The word urgent in my mother's voice carried a weight that told me everything I needed to know. Whatever timeline they'd been following, they were ready to make their move. I called Carla immediately. "They're pushing for a meeting this weekend," I told her. "Then we need to be ready to file on Monday. Aaron, I need you to gather every piece of evidence you can find today and tomorrow. Bank records, credit reports, copies of those documents from their basement, everything." "What about Ben? Can you get him out of the house for the weekend?" "I'll try." I called Ben from a payphone downtown. "Can you meet me at the old spot tonight?" "They're watching me pretty closely, but I think so." "Aaron, something's happening. Mom and Dad have been making phone calls all morning, and they keep mentioning your name. Just be careful. Don't let them know you're planning to leave the house." That afternoon, I drove to the county courthouse to research property records. What I found there added another layer to the fraud. The house that had been purchased in my name was being used as collateral for a business loan taken out by Merton Holdings, LLC. If the loan defaulted, I would be personally liable for the debt. I also discovered that Ben's name appeared on several documents as a co-signer for business obligations. My parents had been systematically entangling both of us in their financial schemes, creating a web of legal obligations that would have been nearly impossible to escape if we hadn't discovered it in time. At the public library, I used their computers to research Merton Holdings, LLC. The company had been registered 2 years ago with Damon as president and Patricia as secretary. According to the filing, the company's purpose was real estate investment and financial services. In reality, it appeared to be a shell company designed to funnel fraudulently obtained money. That evening, I met Ben in the woods behind our childhood home. He looked exhausted and scared. "They want to have a family meeting tomorrow night," he said without preamble. "They've been planning it all day. Mom even called Aunt Sylvie to cancel their weekend plans." "What exactly did they tell you about this meeting?" "They said it's time to formalize some family arrangements and that both of us need to be there. Dad mentioned something about signing some papers to make everything official." The signing papers part confirmed my worst fears. They were planning to present us with legal documents, probably powers of attorney or loan guarantees, and pressure us into signing them. "Ben, I need you to not be there tomorrow night." "What do you mean?" "Find an excuse to be somewhere else. Stay with a friend, go to a movie, anything. Don't be in that house when they're expecting both of us." "But what about you?" "I'll handle it, but I need to know you're safe first." Ben was quiet for a moment. "Aaron, there's something else. I found more documents today." He pulled out his phone and showed me photos he'd taken. The documents were loan applications for something called Merton Family Trust, with both our names listed as beneficiaries and our signatures forged at the bottom. "Where did you find these?" "Dad's truck. He left it unlocked when he went into the hardware store, and I saw a folder on the front seat. I only had a few minutes, but I got pictures of everything." The loan applications were for nearly $200,000, supposedly to fund family investment opportunities. If approved, Ben and I would be legally responsible for repaying the money, even though we'd never seen a penny of it. "Ben, this is it. This is what they've been building toward. They're not just stealing from us, they're setting us up to be responsible for massive debts. What do we do? Tomorrow you disappear for the weekend. Tell them you're sick, or that you have to work, or that you're visiting a friend. I don't care what excuse you use, just don't be available for their family meeting." "What about you?" "I'm going to end this." Saturday morning, I spent 3 hours at the bank, gathering every piece of documentation they could provide about the accounts and transfers in my name. The bank manager, a woman named Sandra Noren, who I'd known since high school, was visibly shocked by what the records revealed. "Aaron, I have to ask, did you authorize any of these transfers to Merton Holdings?" "No. I've never heard of that company until this week." "Then we need to file a fraud report immediately. These transfers total over $40,000. "I'm working with an attorney on that. Can you freeze the account?" "Absolutely. And Aaron, I'm required to report suspected fraud to the authorities. I'll be filing a report with the police and the State Banking Commission." This was exactly what I needed. Official documentation of the fraud from a third party would carry much more weight than just my accusations. That afternoon, I received a call from my father. "Aaron, where the hell are you? We've been trying to reach you all day." "I'm running errands, Dad. What's up?" "We need you home tonight, 6 o'clock sharp. Your mother's making your favorite dinner, and we have important family business to discuss." "What kind of business?" "The kind that determines your future, son. Don't be late." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a request, it was a summons. "I'll be there," I lied. Instead, I drove to Carla's office, where we spent the evening finalizing the legal documents we would need. Injunctions to freeze all accounts in my name, fraud reports for the police, and a comprehensive lawsuit against both my parents and Merton Holdings, LLC. "Are you ready for this?" Carla asked as we finished the paperwork. "Once we file these documents, there's no going back. Your parents will know you've discovered everything." "I'm ready." "What about the family meeting tonight?" "I'm not going. Let them wonder where I am." At exactly 6 o'clock, my phone started ringing. First my mother, then my father, then my mother again. I didn't answer any of the calls. By 7 o'clock, the voicemails were getting increasingly frantic. Patricia's voice. "Aaron, where are you? We're all waiting for you." Damon's voice. "Son, you're making a big mistake. Get home now." Patricia again. "Aaron, please call me. We're worried sick." At 8 o'clock, Ben called from a friend's house. "They're going crazy," he whispered. "Mom called me 3 times asking if I knew where you were. I told them I was sick and couldn't make it to dinner, and Dad actually yelled at me. He's never yelled at me before." "Good. Let them panic. It's better than having them corner us with their fake legal documents." "Aaron, they mentioned calling the police to report you missing." "Let them. I'm not missing. I'm just not available for their fraud meeting." Sunday morning brought a new development. Mrs. Rue called me at 7 a.m. Erin, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling so early, but I thought you should know. Your parents had visitors last night. 3 men in suits, and they didn't look happy. What time was this? Around 9 o'clock. They were only there for about 20 minutes, but I could hear raised voices from my garden. This was interesting. If my parents had been expecting to present Ben and me with loan documents or powers of attorney at Saturday night's meeting, our absence would have left them unable to deliver whatever they'd promised to these men in suits. Did you recognize any of the visitors? No, but one of them was carrying a briefcase, and another had a folder that looked like legal papers. After I hung up with Mrs. Rue, I realized that my parents' fraud scheme was bigger than just stealing from Ben and me. They'd apparently made commitments to other people, possibly lenders or business partners, that required our signatures to fulfill. By not showing up to their meeting, Ben and I had potentially sabotaged a much larger operation. This made us more dangerous to them, but it also gave us more leverage. Sunday afternoon, I met with Carla one final time before we filed the legal papers. I've been thinking about strategy, she said. Your parents are going to claim that this is all a misunderstanding, that they were managing your finances with your implied consent, and that you're an ungrateful son who's trying to hurt them. How do we counter that? With the timeline documents you found, and with the testimony of witnesses like Mrs. Rue and the bank manager. But Erin, there's something else we should consider. What? A public confrontation. Your parents have built their reputations on being upstanding community members. If we can expose their fraud in a public setting, it will be much harder for them to deny or minimize what they've done. What kind of public setting? I noticed in the local paper that your mother is giving a presentation at the community center board meeting this Tuesday night, something about a new fundraising initiative. The irony was perfect. Patricia Merton, respected community organizer, presenting a fundraising plan to the same community she'd been defrauding through her elaborate scheme. What are you suggesting? That we attend the meeting, that we present our evidence to the board and the community at the same time. Make it impossible for them to spin this as a private family dispute? I thought about it for a moment. The idea of publicly confronting my parents was terrifying, but it was also exactly what they deserved. They'd used their community reputation to cover their crimes. It was time for that reputation to be destroyed. Let's do it, I said. Are you sure? Once we do this, it's going to be the biggest scandal this town has ever seen. Good. Maybe it will prevent them from doing this to other families. As I left Carla's office, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in a week, I knew exactly what I was going to do and when I was going to do it. The scared, confused man who had found Ben's warning note was gone. In his place was someone who understood that sometimes justice required courage, and that family loyalty couldn't excuse criminal behavior. Tuesday night was going to be very interesting. Monday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 12 voicemails. My parents had apparently spent Sunday night and Monday morning in full panic mode, alternating between threats and pleading in their messages. Patricia's voice, shaky and desperate. Erin, please call me back. I don't understand why you're doing this to us. We're your family. Damon's voice, cold and angry. Son, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. Call me back, or you're going to regret it. Then Patricia again, crying. Erin, whatever you think you know, you're wrong. Please come home so we can explain everything. I deleted all the messages without listening to them completely. Whatever explanations they wanted to offer, it was too late for that. Carla called at 9 a.m. The injunction papers are filed. All accounts in your name have been frozen, and the court has issued a temporary restraining order preventing your parents from accessing any assets purchased with fraudulent loans. How long before they find out? They probably already know. Banks move fast on court orders. I'd expect them to call you within the hour. She was right. At 9:47 a.m., my phone rang with my father's number. This time I answered. Hello, Dad. What have you done? His voice was barely controlled rage. What the hell have you done? I've protected myself and Ben from your fraud scheme. Did you really think we wouldn't figure it out? Fraud scheme? Erin, we're your parents. Everything we did was for the family. Forging my signature on loan documents was for the family. Stealing money from Ben's account was for the family. Setting up a shell company to funnel fraudulent funds was for the family. The silence on the other end of the line lasted for almost 30 seconds. You don't understand the situation, Damon finally said. There are people involved in this who won't be happy about what you've done. People who expected certain arrangements to be finalized. Are you threatening me, Dad? I'm warning you. Some situations can't be undone just because you file papers with a lawyer. After he hung up, I immediately called Carla and repeated the conversation. That sounded like a direct threat, she said. We need to report this to the police. Will they take it seriously? With the financial evidence we have? Absolutely. An hour later, I was sitting in the police station giving a statement to Officer Marlowe Ty, a fair-minded cop about my age who I'd known casually since high school. He listened to my story with growing amazement, taking careful notes and asking detailed questions about the timeline and evidence. Aaron, I have to be honest with you, he said when I finished. This is one of the most sophisticated family fraud cases I've ever seen. The level of planning and documentation is incredible. What happens now? We open a formal investigation. Based on what you've told me and the evidence your attorney has provided, we'll be interviewing your parents within the next few days. We'll also be looking into this Merton Holdings company and any other business relationships they might have. Officer Ty, my father implied that there are other people involved in this who might be dangerous. Should I be worried about my safety? Take the threat seriously. Vary your routines, stay in public places when possible, and call us immediately if you feel threatened. As I left the police station, I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. The legal wheels were finally turning, but I also knew that cornered criminals could be unpredictable. I called Ben from a payphone. How are things at home? Terrible, he whispered. Mom hasn't stopped crying since yesterday, and Dad keeps making angry phone calls. They know I'm involved somehow, but they're not sure how much I know. Are you safe? I think so. But Aaron, they're planning something for tomorrow night. What kind of something? I overheard Dad on the phone. He said something about making this right at the community board meeting. He mentioned your name specifically. This confirmed what Carla and I had suspected. My parents knew about the board meeting plan somehow, and they were preparing their own counterattack. Ben, I need you to be somewhere else tomorrow night, far away from the community center and far away from home. Where should I go? Stay with a friend, go to a movie in the next town, I don't care. Just don't be anywhere they can find you. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was getting ready for work when someone knocked on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize, middle-aged, professionally dressed, carrying a briefcase. Mr. Merton, my name is Della Singh. I'm an accountant at your father's business. I wonder if I could speak with you for a moment. I opened the door cautiously. What about? About some irregularities I've noticed in the books. Irregularities that involve your name. I invited her in, and she sat nervously on my couch, clutching her briefcase. Mr. Merton, I've been doing the books for your father's shop for 3 years. 6 months ago, I started noticing some unusual transactions. Money being transferred to accounts I couldn't identify. Invoices for services that didn't match any work being done. What kind of transactions? Large cash withdrawals, transfers to something called Merton Holdings, and payments to what appeared to be shell companies. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. I made copies of everything, just in case. The documents she showed me were devastating. They proved that Damon had been using his auto shop as a front for money laundering, moving fraudulent loan money through the business accounts to make it look legitimate. Ms. Singh, why are you showing me this? Because yesterday your father asked me to prepare some documents that would make you liable for the business debts. He wanted me to backdate them to make it look like you'd been a partner in the business for years. She looked me in the eye. I can't be part of that kind of fraud, Mr. Merton, and I thought you should know what he was planning. Will you testify about what you've seen? If it comes to that, yes. I've already made copies of everything for my own protection. After Della left, I called Carla immediately. This is perfect, she said after I described the meeting. An insider witness with financial records. Your parents won't be able to claim this was just a family misunderstanding. Are we ready for tonight? As ready as we can be. I've prepared packets of evidence for every board member and invited Officer Ty to attend. Your parents won't know what hit them. That afternoon, I received one final call from my mother. Aaron, her voice was barely a whisper. Please don't do this. Whatever you're planning for tonight, please don't do this to your family. Mom, you did this to the family. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth. The truth? Her voice suddenly turned hard. The truth is that you're an ungrateful, selfish boy who's trying to destroy the people who raised him. But it won't work, Aaron. We have friends in this community. People who trust us. No one will believe your lies. They're not lies, Mom. And after tonight, everyone will know that. As I hung up the phone, I realized that the woman who had raised me was truly gone. The person I'd been talking to was a stranger, someone capable of years of systematic fraud and manipulation. The mother I remembered from childhood had either never existed or had been completely consumed by greed and control. At 5 o'clock, I met Carla at her office for our final preparation. Are you nervous? She asked. Terrified, I admitted, but also ready. These people destroyed my trust. stole my identity, and turned my brother into a victim. They deserve whatever happens to them tonight. Remember, we're not just exposing them. We're protecting other potential victims. If they've done this to their own children, they might have done it to other people too. As we drove toward the community center, I thought about the man I'd been just 1 week ago. Quiet, overlooked, underestimated. The invisible son who worked as a junior insurance investigator and lived a simple, honest life. That man was gone. In his place was someone who understood that sometimes good people have to do difficult things to stop bad people from causing more harm. The community center parking lot was full when we arrived. Patricia Merton's fundraising presentations were always well attended, and tonight would be no exception. I saw my parents' car near the front entrance, and several other vehicles I recognized as belonging to prominent community members. "Last chance to back out," Carla said. "No backing out. Let's end this." As we walked toward the entrance, I saw Ben's car pulling out of the parking lot. Good. He was following my advice to stay away. Whatever happened in the next hour, at least he would be safe. Inside the community center auditorium, about 60 people were seated in folding chairs facing a small stage. My parents sat in the front row, Patricia looking composed and confident, Damon checking his watch and scanning the crowd. When Patricia saw me walk in, her face went white. When she saw Carla beside me carrying a briefcase full of legal documents, she grabbed Damon's arm and whispered something urgent in his ear. Damon turned around, saw me, and his expression went from surprise to fury to something that looked almost like fear. Officer Ty was standing near the back wall in uniform, just as Carla had arranged. Several board members were seated on the stage, including the chairman, Rylan Hayes, who had known my family for 20 years. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chairman Hayes announced, "we're ready to begin tonight's meeting. Our first item is a presentation by Patricia Merton about a new community fundraising initiative." Patricia stood up and walked to the podium, her hands shaking slightly. She looked out at the crowd, then at me, then at Officer Ty. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice unusually quiet. "I had prepared a presentation about community fundraising, but it seems we have some other business to address first." The room fell silent. This wasn't how Patricia Merton usually conducted herself at public meetings. I stood up. "Chairman Hayes, I'd like to address the board and the community about a matter of public concern." Damon shot to his feet. "This is neither the time nor the place for family disputes, Aaron." "You're right, Dad. This isn't a family dispute. It's a criminal matter." The murmur that went through the crowd was audible. Chairman Hayes looked confused, but gestured for me to continue. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room, "I'm here tonight to present evidence that Patricia and Damon Merton have been operating a systematic fraud scheme that has victimized their own children and potentially other members of this community." The room erupted. Patricia sank into her chair, tears streaming down her face. Damon started toward me, but Officer Ty stepped forward and quietly but firmly guided him back to his seat. "That's a lie," Damon shouted. "He's a disturbed young man who's trying to hurt his family." Carla stood up beside me. "Chairman Hayes, I'm Carla Munoz, attorney for Aaron Merton. I have here documented evidence of identity theft, forgery, fraud, and money laundering committed by the defendants over a period of more than 2 years." She began distributing packets of evidence to the board members and to several community members she'd identified as local business leaders. Officer Ty stepped forward to accept his copy. "The evidence shows," Carla continued, "that Damon and Patricia Merton created a shell company called Merton Holdings, LLC, which they used to funnel money obtained through fraudulent loans taken out in their sons' names. They forged signatures, stole identities, and created false business partnerships to cover their crimes." Mrs. Rue, who was sitting in the third row, stood up. "I'd like to say something, if I may." Chairman Hayes nodded, looking stunned. "I've been the Mertons' neighbor for 20 years, Mrs. Rue said, her voice strong and clear. "In recent months, I've witnessed unusual activity at their home. Strange visitors at odd hours, moving trucks, and arguments that could be heard from my garden. When Aaron asked me about these observations, I realized that something was very wrong." Della Singh, who had been sitting quietly near the back, also stood up. "I'm the accountant for Damon Merton's auto shop. I can confirm that the business has been used to launder money obtained through fraudulent means. I have documentation of irregular transactions and false invoices going back 18 months. The room was completely silent now, except for Patricia's quiet sobbing. Damon made one last attempt to control the narrative. "These people are lying," he said, his voice desperate. "Aaron is a troubled young man who's been influenced by lawyers and neighbors with grudges against our family." Officer Ty stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Merton, based on the evidence presented here tonight and the formal complaint filed yesterday, I'm going to need you to come to the station for questioning." "Are we under arrest?" Patricia whispered. Not at this time, but I strongly advise you to contact an attorney. As my parents were escorted out of the community center, the crowd sat in stunned silence. Chairman Hayes finally spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, in light of tonight's revelations, we'll be postponing any fundraising initiatives until this matter is resolved. The board will be conducting a full review of any community funds that may have been affected. As people began filing out of the auditorium, several community members approached me. Some offered support, others asked questions about the scope of the fraud. A few looked at me with suspicion, as if I might somehow be complicit in my parents' crimes, but I didn't care what anyone thought. For the first time in a week, Ben and I were safe. The fraud had been exposed, the assets had been frozen, and the legal system was taking over. Outside the community center, I called Ben. It's over, I told him. You can come home. What happened? Justice happened. I'll tell you everything when I see you. As Carla and I drove away from the community center, I thought about the cost of what we'd accomplished. My parents' lives were destroyed, their reputations ruined, their freedom potentially forfeit. The family I'd grown up in no longer existed, but Ben was safe. I was safe. And other potential victims were protected. Sometimes justice requires destroying the people you love to save the people you love even more,